guys, welcome back to the Low Bottom High Rise podcast with me, your host, Moira Casaba. And I have a new friend on the show today. Miss Stephanie Quayle is in the house. Thank you for being here, Stephanie.
Oh, I'm so grateful. I just am so looking forward to time with you, not through a screen. I'm getting to Charleston. We are just going to get some FaceTime because I'm so just about what you're about.
Oh,
Leadership and helping people understand. And that's, the whole reason why we're doing this is to, use our lives, right, to serve others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I feel the same exact way about you. I can't wait to get face-to-face time, but I'm so excited about this conversation today. We had a mutual dear friend introduce us, somebody that I respect so much that the second she reached out, I was like, done, connect me with this person. I trust your opinion.
Yeah.
And then I went down the rabbit hole as we do, right? And
Right.
I felt the same way. I was like, I need to know this person. I need to know more about this person. I need to know the story. I need to read the book, which I did, all the things. And so can we just start here? And this is goodness gracious. This is a deep question for you because you in the most beautiful way, I feel like are such a complex person. And like again, I mean that in this beautiful sentiment. But how would you answer the question, who is Stephanie Quayle? Who is Stephanie Quayle?
She's an onion.
Yes.
She's got more layers. I think Stephanie Quayle today is becoming an expert in herself and is working on alignment. So what you see on the outside matches the inside and vice versa. Singer-songwriter, author now, but first and foremost, I'm a daughter, a sister, a stepmom, an aunt, a wife. I'm all the things, and just a woman on a mission to serve. I think that would sum it up.
I love that so much, so much. I love that you just automatically kind of gave like all the roles instead of just the professional bio.
So many.
Let's go. How long have you been? So professionally, obviously new to the new author. So this book that's launching. Yeah. So exciting. I cannot wait to talk about it because it is such a powerful book that is going to just radically change, shape, and save so many lives, I believe.
Wow. From your words to many people's lives, because that's why I did it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I get that. And then singer-songwriter. Tell me about that. How has this been all the way back? Has this been the profession since you first came on the scene into adulthood?
Profession since conception, if you ask my mom. Whoops, I shouldn't probably talk about conception. Sorry, mom, dad. Don't know how that whole thing went down. No, so I am originally from Montana, born and raised in Bozeman, Montana, and I always was singing, right? But it was such a different time. We didn't have TV shows where, you would go from obscurity to a household name in a matter of moments. It was Montana, this is like Montana in the 90s. I'm this little teenager with, a voice and a lot to say through my little, teenage songs. And my family's like, oh, you'll be a singing lawyer. That's kind of like, I don't know, it's not even a job, but cool. And what happened was, Moira, is I was a freshman in high school. There's always that moment, right? I want to know your moment. We have to get to your moment because I think this is the coolest part of any individual's story. Is I was a freshman in high school. The senior girls, I was pegged. I was the one that they were going to haze and bully for whatever reason. And it was the moment that I had to create a shift in my own life, right? And from that, I was like, okay, there has to be more than high school in Montana. Like this can't be where my story is. And I was really angry, as you can imagine. And sometimes when we're angry, it creates the move. And in my case, I was like, I'm going to run away legally. And so I did an exchange program. I signed myself up for an exchange program. This is the most bizarro way to become a country artist, but this is what I did. And I ended up in Freiburg, Switzerland, my junior year of high school.
Wow.
And there just happened to be a band a table away before I started school, like the summer right before I was starting my junior year Freiburg, Switzerland. And I just was eavesdropping because I can't help myself. Sorry. It's just the songwriter in me. There's like, you never know, there's a soundbite somewhere. And they were saying they were looking for a new lead singer. And so I just, jumped into their conversation, being the introvert that I am. And like, hello. And they said, okay, you American, come audition. And I got the gig. And that
Wow.
was the first time where I'm so 16 years old, right?
And how old were they? Were they older, about the
They
same age?
were like high school, some were high school and some were early college.
Yeah.
So I was 16 going into my 17th year, and 17 year of age year.
Right.
And, you know, they just, we just started writing songs together and I started performing with them. And that was my after school program. That was my weekends.
Yeah.
And I was just performing all over and I just made sense. I got on stage and I internally just was like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yes. Isn't that the best feeling in the whole entire world?
Yes. So then fast forward, graduate high school, moved to California because I knew California. Like Nashville seemed like a foreign country.
Right.
Like eventually I'll get there, but I need to go I need to go to Los Angeles.
Right.
What? And a lot of the book kind of takes you through some of that time there. So I went to, Los Angeles, my little country songs and my cowboy boots. Like, why are you here?
Oh my
Like,
God.
you should be in Nashville. I don't know how many times I heard you should be in Nashville over the course of
Wow.
10 years. I know, which is so wild, which the book, those are the lost years. Those are years I never talked about before. So then moved to Nashville, 2011, start my own record label, 2015. And I've been, on the Grand Ole Opry 12 times. I've
Wow.
had 2 songs that chart on the Billboard country charts, like the ones that like Beyonce's #1 at right now. I wasn't quite #1. I was like many, many numbers away from that, but going toward it.
Right. That's so huge.
Huge. It's all huge. So I've had this incredible, wild career in entertainment as both entrepreneur, which is insane. And as we know, any entrepreneur, small business owner, it's just insane. Because it's like a farm, it never sleeps. And now I've been able to parlay my music into a much bigger platform, which is both speaking and the book. And, songs you get 3 minutes.
Yeah.
3.5. And then in between the songs on stage, you get these micro moments to connect with your audience. And I always felt like, but there's more. I have more to say.
Yeah.
Then wrote an album that exposed a time that I never talked about, On the Edge.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
that album, I mean, I kind of shocked my industry because they've always known me as Stephanie Quayle. She's always happy. She's always the cheerleader. She's always the this.
Right.
And so when I put out this album, they're like, wait, what? You
Yeah.
have a backstory. I go, well, we all do.
Right.
Right? It's whether or not we choose to share it. And this was one of those times where I was like, okay, am I writing this music for myself? Let's start there.
Right.
And then, okay, took it to my husband and took it to my team. Is this for me or is this for the world? Like
Right.
there's how sometimes you'll get ready to post
Oh,
something
yeah.
or share something. You're like, okay, wait, is this for me or is this actually helping? Is it
Right.
actually serving? And it was kind of this unanimous, we think your story is meant to help others.
Right.
And it was terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying putting out that album.
What year was that?
So we put out this album November of 22. I didn't even have the book deal yet. I did a podcast to kind of explain just in first person voice the story behind the songs and the stories behind the stories to kind of like set the table, because it was just a conversation that when anyone would ask me in the press, like, oh, so where are you from? And do like this, the surface. It was from Montana. I lived in LA for a minute, 10 years, and no one could really pinpoint because I wouldn't go there.
Right.
One part, you can't kind of go there. You have to really go there.
Right.
And then also I was protecting his daughter.
Right.
And get into the whole who's the his and daughter and the things. So the podcast, short film, really exposing this time in my life and pulling back the curtain, taking the rugs up, opening all the closets with all the skeletons that came tumbling out, and just said, you know what? Here's me fully, because
Right.
I don't want to play a part in my own life. I just want to
Yeah.
be holy and authentic and share the story. And
Yeah.
if I can help one person, what's
What is that? I've been there, right? Like I have, and it was not until I looked back that I kind of realized like what happened, the whole like, it all tumbled out of the closet. And I was like, whoa, that was like not really intentional, but it was.
right?
But what I didn't anticipate in that journey of kind of exposing myself and just stepping out into the
Right.
world, saying, this is fully me, all the things. What I didn't anticipate at all, because you're so stuck in fear of how is this going to be received? How am I going to be judged? What are they going to say about me?
Right.
I didn't understand that that was going to be the moment I stepped into my power.
Yes.
Because you feel like you're powerless in that moment.
Correct.
Is
Well,
that how it felt
yeah,
for you?
1,000%. And I think, and I don't know, and I haven't done a full deep dive on how men deal with shame.
Mm.
I think there's so much shame with women when it comes to an embarrassment that comes. And I'm speaking for myself first and foremost, and I'm a woman. So I'm gonna speak from my own experience.
Yeah.
You know, when we admit to our stuff,
Mhm.
there can be an onslaught of, you're smarter than that. How did you miss that?
Mhm.
And there's an embarrassment with shame, right? That
Mhm.
comes, and we take that, the guilt that I felt went from I made a mistake to I'm a mistake.
Right.
And that is a tricky, tricky, tricky place.
Yeah.
And that took a lot of unwinding. And to your point, when we own our own narrative, we are in full power.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that is so freeing. It's about
So
freedom.
freeing.
Yeah.
And I think what I didn't understand was so many of my kind of own struggles and issues. And, I was like, had gotten sober decades ago, but then I like couldn't shake this eating disorder. Or I couldn't shake this, or I was really struggling and stuck. So much of that was because, just like you talked about in the beginning, I was out of alignment, right?
Right.
Here's me, and
Sure.
then here's the real me behind the curtain that I'm not willing to show you. And so, and that's natural, right? It's like natural for us as humans to not just air all of our dirty laundry and share it all.
Right.
But when you truly are living a facade, and I would never have thought that back in the day,
I get it.
it wasn't intentional. I didn't feel like I was doing that. I just felt like,
Right.
well, gosh, I'm not going to talk about like all of my addiction and all of those dark days, because nobody wants to hear that. Like, why would I share that? So of course I'm going to put on a happy face and be who I am in the world. But
Right.
I didn't understand that because nobody knew that about me.
Right. They
I
didn't believe you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I so relate to what you're saying, because I mean, the entertainment world is an industry of perception and
Right.
sods, right? But what I love about country music, it is so honest and it is so authentic that I think, and this was never said to me like, oh, I really didn't believe you, but there was this sense of, and that kind of like push pull you feel within yourself. And you're like, I wonder if people aren't believing me
Right.
because I'm having to guard this piece of my life or this piece of who I am. Because I think, to your point, and I don't know if you felt this way, I don't ever want to be seen as a victim. Like that's
Right.
not I'm like, all right, like how was I complicit?
Absolutely.
I'm going to own my behavior, and how do I make the right changes for myself to be
Yeah.
better? But also sometimes it can be weaponized against us when
Yes.
we share things about ourselves. So I think it feels like it's kind of shifting. And I think social media has been one part great for that. And one part, you got to protect your boundaries with it as
Right.
well, because we're having more conversation. It is
Yeah.
more accepted and acceptable. And I think we're all realizing that everybody has stuff.
Right.
No
Yeah.
one was, I mean, when you mentioned, addiction and eating disorders, like there's so much that we all experience,
Yeah.
even if it's not full spectrum,
Right.
you know? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
emotional eating 101. I could teach that.
Right.
Right?
So yes, I think 95% of the female population could teach that, but 95% of the female population isn't openly owning that, right? And as you're talking, I keep thinking about, like, just to kind of give this example to the audience, when you're with like your best friend that knows every deep dark secret, and they just know you,
Yeah.
and you feel so safe, and
Yes.
you feel so loved, and you feel so authentically you, those few people that you're like, I can just
Yeah.
completely and utterly and totally be myself.
Mhm.
When you can do more of that in the world,
Oh,
right? That's the shift that we're talking about. I can remember the first time when I started to share openly on social media, which was terrifying. like
terrifying.
like close my
Terrifying.
computer, run away, crawl
Yeah.
under a rock,
Yeah.
terrifying. And I saw somebody in the grocery store, and they came up to me, and they kind of like almost like grabbed my arm, and they were like, "Oh, are you so and so?" And of course, I'm sitting there like, "Oh dear God,
Yep.
oh dear God, oh dear
Yeah, it's
God."
happening.
Yeah, like they're gonna call me out, and they were like tears, right? Tears of thanks and gratitude, and me too.
Right.
And
Right.
I was just like, oh my gosh, this is me being able to do the scariest thing in the world, is helping people. But what I'll never forget is shortly thereafter walking into a gymnasium, and I walked into like the bleachers, and I was kind of like, oh God, oh God. Everyone knows all of my deep dark secrets here if they're following me on social.
Sure.
And I thought, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Like, thank God, this,
Yeah.
what you see is what you get.
Yeah. I don't think we're meant to hide.
No.
And for everyone, I mean, we've chosen to be public and in the process of serving others, right? And using our stories and our experiences and our lessons and all those things. Not everyone has to do that. We're not suggesting
No.
that, but when you can be free from trying,
Yes.
right? Man, when you can just be like, I'm enough. I'm enough in all my awkward,
Yes.
weird things of this.
Yeah.
It's that self-acceptance that I think is
Yeah.
so comforting. And it's just, it takes the time it takes to get there. And I think we both want people to be able to truncate that time so they get the good stuff sooner.
Right. And that's just it. It's the good stuff sooner. And it's interesting when you're saying that, like, we as society, just automatically kind of put on this mask. I'm thinking about, my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was maybe 11 or 12, like middle school, like worst age ever. And it's so interesting because I remember middle school, you think everybody's perfect and you're weird. And so there I have this son who's like really thinks like
Right.
he's got the scarlet letter of this diagnosis.
Right.
And I hate to admit this openly on air, but I remember being like, by the way, he has this, she has this. Like, because I'm talking to moms,
Yeah,
I
level
know,
the playing field.
yeah, like and I'm talking about like the allergies or the
Sure.
learning the disorders, all this stuff. But I'm like, nobody's talking about this. Like, if we could also teach our kids,
Right.
like,
And
just
to
help.
understand, like, things can happen to us that we have zero control over.
Right,
Zero. Yeah,
right.
no, it is so interesting. Uh,
The facade goes up so early,
Early. I
Yeah.
think, and to your point, like looking back, I'll have to kind of do a self deep dive on when, I started really like, okay, that has to be different ways, because I think I was 12. I mean, I was wide open with the worst haircut, headgear, braces. I mean, like, it was like
Yeah.
that. I've got to find those pictures because they are real, but I just love her.
Yes.
She was a honey badger. She didn't give up. Like, you know what I mean? She was
Yes.
so able to walk in such awkwardness with such
Yeah.
grace and self-assurance that I think, that's where I think I'm getting back to that, right?
Yeah.
I'm really grateful that I don't have the haircut that I have. And all the headgear, man, that was
Yeah.
rough. That was rough. And but now that just okay with selfness.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
not everyone has to like me, and that is okay.
Right. Isn't
I
that
like
a beautiful thing?
that.
Isn't that a beautiful thing? And what we both know is that when we are able to just stand fully in that self-acceptance, there is zero judgment. There
Yeah,
is zero like care of, not that we don't care, but like,
sure.
I'm just happy for you for this and happy for you for that
Yeah,
and happy. I don't have opinions. I really don't have opinions
yeah,
of other people's lives because I think so often we're like, I'm not
sure.
judging them. I'm just like making an observation. I'm like, well, yeah, it's a
Right.
strong observation.
Right. And then
But
I go, okay, I check myself because whenever I find myself going, I'm like, Steph, let's just take a look at you today. How did we do?
yeah,
And then it's
yeah,
like, oh, okay, reminder, good. But I think it's such a natural thing that humans do, right? We can't, like we're so used to focusing outward.
mhm,
One of the tasks I've tasked myself with is if I'm on social media for 30 minutes,
yeah,
right, posting, checking, looking at your feed, like what is she teaching us today? I have to match it with something internal. So if
right,
it's reading a book, if it's getting into a seminar, if it's getting into something that's like, okay, I've got to match that behavior. If I
ah,
spend hours trying to look like a human, on the outside, I got to spend hours being a
yeah,
on the inside. So I'm really trying to, like, with that alignment, just gotta
yes,
own ship.
yes, 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 yes. Amen, amen, amen. So let's talk about the pivot into the book, right? So 2022, you released the album with all the
Yes.
lyrics,
Yes.
kind of saying like, kind of, for lack of a better word, exposing the story, really, the
Yes.
decade that you haven't even touched. And
Yes.
so, how does the book come about? What was that process? Because I'm
Yes.
sure it was hard.
Wild. It was wild, and it was hard in the greatest sense of the word. Which I think hard can be mentally paralyzing, right? It can just like, or you can't move, and it's like just existing in quicksand, and
Yeah,
just like don't know. And this was because I also had the responsibility of, you have to have this done, right?
right.
It kind of was like, it also helped me to keep going. But
Yeah.
writing Why Do We Stay, to give a little backstory, when in 2009, when that plane crash happened, that was a Wednesday,
Mm,
5 days of grief.
mm,
And then at the funeral, there's all these other women. And this is the man I'm building my life with. I'm raising his daughter with him. This is my guy, right? And I'm madly in love with him. And Sunday night, 5 days later, it is confirmed that I'm not the only woman. And I just went from grief to betrayal in the quickest sense, right? It wasn't years of mourning and grieving, and then it was 5 days. And then I went into guard shutdown. No one can access this. I trust no one outside of like my family and maybe a couple of friends. And after, some discovery and discovery and discovery, my stepmom and I, we still talk about it. We're like, this is going to be a book one day. That
yeah.
was 2009, right? So now cut to, I share the music. We have a podcast that comes out, all these different things. And meanwhile, I'm kind of starting to create like the memoir, thinking that this is going to be like just me putting out to the world to really support the story. Didn't even really look at the magnitude of what if we created a tool book instead of
Right.
a. And so, and it's such a wild story, which I would love to share with you and your listeners. So, HarperCollins, which is an incredible publisher, we get on a Zoom. I'm in Montana, and we start talking through it, and they're like, we want to do this book with you. And so as I'm sharing the story, and as we're starting to like, kind of put the parts together of what this is going to look like, the conversation is, this could be bigger.
Yeah.
Not bigger from grandiose like that, bigger of impact.
Yeah. And different.
Yeah. And with the intention of, let's use your story to help others who are maybe not in it yet, maybe on just scratching the surface of a narcissistic toxic relationship, that are in it, and those that are right out of it. And what like, how do we do this now?
Yeah.
And
And
so that,
that's what I just
like,
want to clarify really quick for a
yeah,
minute here. Just thus far for listeners, this isn't just a story of, a partner cheating.
correct.
This is so much deeper and
Yeah,
there's so many more layers to this
a lot of
than
layers.
just a cheating partner.
Yeah, completely. And thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad you got to read the book, because there's, I think even more so than it is about the relationships, it's really about the relationship with myself and what I had to learn the long way. The whole point of this book is really, if people get to read it and listen, and share it and listen to all the different things that they can, not make the mistakes I made, not miss the things I miss. This is like, hey, I don't want you to lose the years I lost.
Right.
Time is our most precious commodity. We never get it back. If I can give people time back, oh man, that's like the greatest gift, right? And so when I say the lost years, like, I don't ever get those back.
Yeah.
And it wasn't 1 year. It was a lot of years. And when we try to get over things, avoid things, it really elongates the time to get through it.
Yeah.
So let's not do that. So then it was okay. So we're writing the book. We want it to be bigger. We want it to help. So now we're in a self-help category, right? So this falls into we need an expert, because I am not an expert in anyone but myself, right? I don't have a degree in psychology. I would say I have a master's in toxic relationships now, after, both romantic and business, which, it all hits everywhere. Right. And so we were able to bring in Keith Campbell, and
Amazing. I mean, I
a
love,
treasure. What a treasure.
I've never read a book that's like, because I love personal story. That's how I
Sure.
learn. That's what
Same,
captivates.
same.
And I'm telling you, I'm a ferocious reader, but ferocious by like, I kind of force myself to do it.
Yeah.
I could not put this book down. I could not, because it's like a movie that you can't stop watching,
Right.
I mean, because it's your story. It's not just a 10 steps to whatever, and that's what makes this so powerful, is the combination of your story. But hey, we have a professional here to actually give you that opinion. It's so powerful.
He he was how he even came into my life is so divinely orchestrated. You couldn't never, if you were to say this is what's going to happen, I'd be like, you are high. uh it was wild. I was in Los Angeles before I recorded the album to walk my steps, to go back to all those hard places.
Wow.
So this is when we recorded the album. So this is in spring of 22.
Yeah.
So I go, I mean, and as soon as I land, I'm very, I'm very visual. So I love stories. So I remember renting a white Mustang, because I was like, this is my white horse.
Wow.
It's very dramatic. I'm a country artist, like, let's just be honest. So, but I was going to go, like, as soon as I touched down, meet with one of the women.
Mm.
Yeah. And I remember pulling over. Well, from the story, I remember pulling over and just kind of collecting myself, because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what she was going to say. So you have to read the book to get there, but Moira knows. So I go from there, Moira, and I'm like, okay, I just did that. I had the courage, and now I can like go to my little Airbnb and like
Yeah.
sit in all these thoughts and feelings. And so I did that. And then I walked over to this little hotel and I sat down at the bar and I ordered the most expensive whiskey. And so I'm just sitting there with my little whiskey and my feelings going, whoa, I, I just faced something that has been in my mind now for, at the time, I think that would have been 13 years. And we create all these questions and what it could be. And then but this, now I had the information,
Right.
right? I didn't have to guess. And it wasn't from someone else. This was firsthand information. Like, okay, I now have it. And so at the end of the bar, there are these two guys just trying to go like, what's happening in this situation here? We've got this one person sitting here alone drinking and she's deep in thought. And so they look over and they're like, you good? You're everything good? I was like, well, friends, this has been a day. This has been a day for the book. And I hadn't, didn't even have the book yet. And one of the guys at the bar is who introduced me to Keith.
Oh my gosh.
So I like cut to now, like I know, right?
I have goosebumps like all the way up and down my whole body.
So forever later, I'll have to I'm such a chronological, I can't give you the exact date, so I don't want to give it. So I'm going to just go with date, what it was. I reached out to him and I said, hey, I'm writing a book. Do you know anyone who's an expert in narcissism? And he literally writes back, are you kidding? And I go, no, I'm like really asking. And he goes, look at this link. And it was the cover of like Psychology Today. And it was his article.
Oh my gosh.
His expertise in narcissism.
Amazing.
And the only reason he couldn't do the book is because he's working on his own book. So it was a conflict. So he goes, but I've got it. I think I have your person. And that was Keith. Isn't that wild?
It's wild.
Wild.
Wild. This is what I call listen to the whisper. It's like I have bracelets that say LTTW, like listen to the whisper. And I'm just going to interject for a second because I always want my audience to remember, like to have the story, what you just shared. This is the power of listening to our intuition, our gut, God, whisper, whatever you want to call it. I had a very similar experience where I had this crazy, I was publishing just my first like journal. Yeah. And I was like, I need to ask this girl because I think she might have done this a few years ago, like a random person whose name I remember on Facebook. Anyway, so like I somehow end up like contacting this girl. I was like, hey, I got to ask you a question. And she's like, well, let's hop on a call. I was like, call? Okay, whatever. And so it was this crazy day. I get on the phone with her and I'm like, hey, I actually just wanted to ask you about this thing. Do you know, like, I figured if you've done this, I can kind of speed up the process. She's like, did you not know this is my job? This is what I do. Same experience. Like you just called the point person. You're looking for the point person, but
you just kind of went, yeah.
But that's listening to the power. Like you unlock these crazy leaps, like quantum leaps of like where you're trying to get to in seconds.
And also I think when it's right, it's easy. Yeah. And when I say when it's right, it's easy, that doesn't mean the work ethic of it. I mean like that, when that door is meant to open, it opens. It's not like a crack. It's like, no, walk through this door.
Right.
And I've really gotten.
But you had walked through so many doors to get there. Like that's the thing. If you hadn't gone back to California, if you hadn't confronted this, if you hadn't leaned into that whisper saying, you need to go back, you need to lean into this pain, you need to rewalk your story and your steps. Like that's I always teach, like when you just go like, oh my gosh, it's just so freaking hard, but okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep trudging this road. I'm going to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Then that magical door opens that you're like, what? I feel like the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, like that's how you're repaid for your obedience, right?
I do agree. And I think what's so powerful is that it even happens within your own family when your family sees you stepping into that kind of, this is hard, I'm going to do it anyway. This
Yeah.
is hard. I don't want to, but I'm going to do it anyway. It has this beautiful ripple effect. And I really experienced that with my dad, because when I first set out to, the music, he can get that, you can kind of like, you can create your own story within the stories.
Right.
When it's on the page in black and white,
Yeah.
there's no, there's of course interpretation, but it's pretty black and white.
And you can't edit the caption. Like, that's what I always say about a book, right? You can't edit the captions.
Yeah,
Like, it's not
exactly.
yeah.
And he was like, why would you want to go back? Like
Oh,
it really, he was like, I don't, and he meant it from a protective father,
right,
like that was so painful. It was so painful for him because he couldn't fix it.
right.
He couldn't protect me from it, right? Which is so precious. And also like we we can hope to protect the ones we love, but at the end of the day, we have these journeys. And he started reading the book just, was it January, February, just a few months, yeah, February. And that's when it switched for him. He goes, this is going to help a lot of people. This took a lot of courage. And that was such a cool moment to see such a 180
Right.
from why would you ever.
Especially that generation, right? It's that
Totally,
generation that
totally right.
cannot understand why we would
Why?
be sharing what we're sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's my hope, right? I hope that as people read this, they go into their own closets.
Yeah.
They go like take up the rugs and they're like, all right, let's go get into the dirty. Let's go get into the dark. And even as like, it's interesting because my mom and my stepmom, as I was writing it, I had them as my like checks, right? Like, am I exaggerating? Or
Right.
did this really happen? Because also, as time goes on, we either make things better or sometimes we can make them worse in our mind as we
Right.
navigate. And they're like, no, it was that bad. I'm like, oh, okay, you know? And so they were my, I just had to keep checking because it was just a little, it's even overwhelming to think that everyone will have access to the story in like, no time. And now my husband and my dad are reading it, which I find in, my women, my
Yeah.
mom and my stepmom, they were like my pillars just of not only accountability, but strength.
Yeah.
And really leaning into that. Yeah, this is what you're supposed to do. Like, this totally makes sense. And, husband has been extraordinarily supportive. Like he's just other level. But I didn't really have him along the way because he wasn't there. He's there for the good stuff, he wasn't there for those years. So I was like, well, and then my dad, he was just like, you just get fiery. He's like, ah. Like, okay, dad, you can't contribute to this portion. So
Right.
we'll just let you read it at the end. I know it is really something just how people react to that feeling of like, no, it feels easier to avoid ourselves. It feels easier. It's not easier. And to your point of like, it's such a holistic approach. I think that our health is 100% affected when we keep it inside. And we're just not meant to carry all this stuff.
Right. I agree. I agree. I always say pain shared is cut in half. And
Oh,
think
I
of
love that.
many people you are going to be sharing this with. It's going to be cut in half and half and half and half and half a million times over.
And
I
it takes the power away from the pain, and it does create space for healing.
absolutely, absolutely.
You're amazing.
Oh, you're amazing. And just, I feel
Cool.
like what's going to also come out of this is, of course, there are going to be just thousands, if not millions of people that are going to identify. And I know that at this point in the game, you're not alone in this,
Yeah.
but for other women to know that they're not alone in this,
Right.
that's what takes shame away. That's why,
1,000%.
yeah.
And that's why I go to all the places
Yeah.
like originally I didn't think I would touch on everything that I touched upon, but as I was writing the book, so I went to Montana we still have a place there. And I just February of last year, just hunkered down and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And I would have, you know, I don't know when you're writing, if you feel this way, but I had this time that from about, I would get up about 4 or 5 without an alarm. It would just naturally happen. And I would write for about 4 or 5 hours and then I'd be toast.
Yeah.
And there were these aha moments that happened. And one of those for me was I've been so focused on the first toxic relationship, right? Paulo, where he dies in this plane crash, and it's this larger than life, stranger than fiction, lifetime movie thing. Oh, wait, there's more. And then the next toxic relationship. And, you know, one of the hopes too is like, we have to know the signs so we don't repeat the mistake.
Right.
We
Right.
have to know the lessons. We have to know the information. And that's why Keith is so valuable in the book, and why he wanted to do it is he said, I haven't experienced this. I teach this.
Right. Right.
Your story, it's firsthand. It's not, well, so-and-so went through. It's like, no, this is your story. And I can speak to your story, but your story is universal.
Mm.
And that is, none of us are islands. We're all susceptible because I think we want to believe people. You know, we want to believe that people are good.
Right.
And trust is the most precious.
Yes, 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 yes. Oh my gosh. This is going to be so big, Stephanie. Like, I'm so excited for this story and this message and this teaching really to get out into the world and into the hands of so many that need it. So I'm gonna go ahead. I never say this on podcasts because the Lord knows when this is going to actually drop. It's the end of March. This will
Yes.
probably drop in a few weeks. But when can people get their hands on this book?
Yes, April 30th, the book comes out. And then we are doing an audio, which if you have you done an audio book before?
Like recorded it myself?
Yes.
No.
Boy, howdy. I've been recording music since I was 16 years of age, right?
Yes. Tell me about this experience.
Audiobook, it's different.
Yeah.
You know, also, I now understand why like Meryl Streep gets hired, or you know, Samuel, like these voices,
Right.
you know, because
Yeah.
they carry so much, you know, juice. I also love listening to authors that are telling their own stories. So that was really important. And
Yeah.
Keith is in Keith's voice, you know, which is so cool. And I haven't heard his part yet. We're still finalizing it, but it's just different when you say it out loud. And the moments that when I was writing, this is me, like Jim Carrey from that movie. I would have these moments that would take my breath, or I would get very emotional and I'd have to walk away. And those moments tended to do with when I wasn't good to me. Not when others weren't good to me, but when I wasn't good to me.
Yeah.
That would be way more.
Yeah.
And so I was curious if when I was recording the audio, if those moments would match.
Right.
And, and they didn't. There were other moments when I was saying it that shook me to where, like, I was like, hey, God, take a minute. I just had to go collect
Wow.
myself. And
Yeah.
it was really interesting to see, you know, I'm such a data junkie. I'm so curious, like, how the mind
Mhm.
manages trauma
Yeah.
and how it kind of decides, like, that's okay, that's going to take some emotion, and other moments didn't. It was really interesting. Yeah.
Gosh, I bet that was like a whole nother layer of healing, just reading it because you're like, wasn't expecting these moments to kind of bubble up.
Completely.
Wow.
Completely. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Well, I am thrilled for you for this message for this book. This podcast probably will drop right before the release.
That's
So
so incredible.
yeah,
Thank
so we're gonna orchestrate that perfectly for
you.
you.
Amazing.
Sure, all the links are in the show notes for everything, for your book tour, for getting the pre-sale, getting the book, all the things. So guys, just go to the show notes and it's all right there. What else? What else is like on the horizon for Stephanie Quayle? Tell me.
So we do have music that we're releasing with the book, which is going to be really cool. And now me as a songwriter also feels aligned,
Yes.
right? So I'm excited for the songs that I'm going to write and that I am writing. I'm finding myself I'm such an outward person, extrovert, and stage and like performing at colleges and high schools and anywhere, uh, I'm in this internal time where it's just like I'm really getting quiet a lot more than I have. Sitting in the silence
Mm.
and seeking answers there first,
Yeah.
which is exciting. And I got to share like a micro story with a group of high school students. And I was like, well, they're not dealing with toxic relationships. And you could have, I mean, they roared when I'm like, you all aren't. And they were like, you have no idea. And I was like, oh, okay. There's a need. Because one of the things is, I'm almost 45. Like, does this message matter to those young minds? And what hit me was absolutely.
Yes.
They're getting inundated with information that, it gets trendy. Toxic is trendy. Narcissism is trendy. But the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
So what if we're able to talk to high school and college students and stop it before it begins? One of the coolest conversations I had with one of my guy friends, he read the book and he said, this makes me want to be a better husband and a better father. And that's like, okay.
Yes.
Because sometimes we think, oh, this is just for women. It's not. It's for women and men. The story is a woman's perspective because it was my perspective.
Right. Right.
What happened to me? And I'm just, I just want it to create such great impact that the conversation that was then, and there's just this shift in bad people, right? Because people are getting wiser and making stronger discernments and understanding like, no, that doesn't add up. You've shown me who you are and I'm going to believe you.
Right. Right.
I'm not going to create a better version of the person in front of me. I'm going to take you at face and person value, right? Like, I think we can always kind of, do the thing, but really when people show us, I love that quote. I don't even know who came up with it, but when people show us who they are, believe them.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Versus potentialize. I don't know, that's not probably a word either, but sometimes we'll put
It should be
potential, right? Like, oh man, but if only they were X, Y, and Z, they would be great.
Yeah. And that message for young girls, oh my goodness. Because I think back even to my younger years, and I was like so dang strong and independent and like I could just do anything. But when it came to men, and I had a healthy, like, nuclear family. I had a great solid brothers. Like, why in the world would I have so easily been a victim to the exact same situation you were in? I just happened to not, connect with somebody that's like that. Like, I'm just reading your story and I'm like, oh dear God, like that would have been me. That would have 100% been me. And what do we need to do differently to equip our women and our girls to see the signs sooner, just like you said?
And that's one of, I get the opportunity to ask Keith these questions. And it is like, like this book is just the beginning of kind of, hopefully, I mean, I know there's a lot of books coming out on this, which is incredible. And there's so much information. Keith was one of the first to talk about narcissism. He was in, I can't remember which article it was, like 15 years ago. I had never even heard of these terms until recently. Over the course of making this, I'd heard of the, gaslighting, and I'd heard of the movie back in, which I, met that movie. Like I haven't even, I can't, anyhow. So, but really understanding the identifiers, because I think that's sometimes what it is, and the terminology to go, oh, that's what this is. Love bombing is a real thing.
Right.
And I was like, wow, this feels so good. Didn't know how manipulative it was.
Right.
How tricky. it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Oh, so good, Stephanie.
I'm
So
coming to Charleston. We're just going to make it happen.
my brain is like going a million miles an hour in the background. I already have like, I'm like, oh, we probably need to do this at Charleston Music Hall. I know a couple other people that we can pull in. Like, I see the whole night.
Yeah, I feel it too, because I got
feel it.
chili willies all over. And,
Yes. Yes.
it's really incredible. And I just go back to, like, when you talk about that whisper, how I met your friend. you know, I get invited to, I'm already in Texas for an event. A last minute opportunity comes about. I am sharing some of my music and a little bit of my story in a truncated fashion in this room of extraordinary humans, and get to share a conversation with our, no, I'm gonna call her my now mutual friend. You've known her a long time. I'm fast track knowing her now because she's just and that moment created this moment.
Yeah.
And that is just the power of community, right? Especially when we want the best for others.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
there's
Same
it's
intention.
like candle lights candle.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the other candles light.
Yes. I love
And
that.
it's just good. It's just good. There's more good than we sometimes give the world credit for.
I agree. I agree. And we get more, we see more of what we focus on. If you focus on the good, you live in a world that is good. And it's up
So
to
true.
us to figure out, what we want to focus on in the world we want to live in. So oh
Oh,
my gosh, Stephanie, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You guys make sure that you go to the show links, grab her book, grab everything you can. I'm going to link your website, all the things. Follow her on social media. When you are listening to this episode, please share it on your stories, audience. Please tag Stephanie, tag me, and message us. Let us know questions, thoughts. We'd love to hear that. And thank you guys. Thanks, Stephanie, again for being here. I really appreciate your time.
well, you are spectacular. I'm so grateful. I can't wait to continue to learn from you because you are just a force for good, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, all right, you guys, we got to wrap there. We will see you next week.